Welcome to the Deerfield Theater podcast. In this season, we're talking about Theater D's production of Our Town. In case you're tuning in and didn't already know, Deerfield Theater is putting on a production of Our Town this March and April of 2025. And performances start Friday, March 28th and go through Sunday, April 13th. So while you're listening to this episode, visit the link in the show notes and get your tickets. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have two guests, which is a rare occasion for the Deerfield Theater podcast. Longtime listeners know we actually launched this podcast with having two guests on the show. The technology has gotten better, though the internet has not. Chuck, Quinn, the third and the fourth, welcome to the Deerfield Theater podcast.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, so this is very cool. This is family theater. We've got father son in a play about fathers and sons. We didn't get a chance to get into it beforehand, but do either of you want to talk a little bit about the nature of the role and like the play and what it's like to be father and son in real life and father and son on stage? Well, we'll see whoever wants to go first with that one.
Chuck, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, it's a real stretch. No, it's a lot of fun. It's great. My very first theatrical experience was with my dad. It was The Wizard of Oz. I was a munchkin. He was the Cowardly Lion. So this is really where it began for me. So it's really fun to revisit it now, 20-something years later. So it's a blast. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is. It's very interesting looking at the father and son relationship in Our Town and kind of the differences and similarities between our real life relationship. And it's very interesting to kind of explore that with Chuck. We have worked together besides The Wizard of Oz. We also did a show at Citadel a few years ago together, which was fun. I always enjoy working with him and kind of, watching him work on stage too. So it's really a very enjoyable experience.
There's this idea that of metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. And it's when you think about thinking, it actually makes your ability to think better. Well, it's one thing to act together in a play and be father and son, but this play is about the father-son relationship, right? And so do you think, and I know we're diving right into the deep end here, but that's because the internet might go out on us at any moment. I'm sure well, I don't know, but I assume your relationship, there might be some similarities, there might be some differences between the characters in the play, but just by performing in a role that is, you're portraying father, son, I realize you're still in the middle of rehearsals, but has taking on the role of son and the role of father at all made you think about your own real life relationship as father-son?
I would say a little bit. It's interesting, the contrast. The play takes place in the 1900s, the first decade of the last century. And it's interesting, the differences of how fathers and sons relate to each other, how that has changed over the last 120 years. I like to think that Chuck and I have a better relationship than Doc Gibbs and George. There are issues that they have that I don't think we deal with. But the funny part in the second act is that, and I hope Chuck doesn't mind me sharing this spoiler, it's about the character. I play Doc Gibbs and Chuck is George Gibbs. It's George Gibbs's wedding day. And kind of the way, they relate to each other during that wedding morning, kind of it has been making me think about Chuck is going to be married in September. And so we're kind of living through that in real time. So that's a very interesting kind of parallel for ourselves and the characters in the play. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The show is really about, at least to me, finding, and this is actually a Thurton Wilder quote, finding value in the everyday moments above all price, is what he said. It's about the little moments, and, he compares it to the lifetime of a star, right? And the show touches on mortality and, all these things a lot, but it drives the whole, savoring that relationship and everyday moment, closer to home. When you're actually doing the show with your dad, you get to be there with someone that you do want to savor the moment with, makes acting that much easier. So yeah, I've really valued that.
Mm-hmm. And to build on that, sorry, it is about valuing not only the moments, but the people in your life. You
Yeah.
know, it's the simple moments and it's being in the moment with the people who are important to you.
Yeah.
So I have had the children of performers on the show by themselves. I've had the parents who are performers of children who are performers on the show by themselves. And so selfish question here, though I've asked it of those people in those contexts in the past. I have a 4-year-old daughter who is already dancing around our house singing "I've Got a Golden Ticket" and pretending to be Grandpa Joe, right? So I fully anticipate performing with her in the future, even if it's just for fun. But
Mhm.
I'd love to get a peek into that future and learn some lessons vicariously. Well, and this is a unique moment to have both of you on because you get to both talk about it. So from Chuck the Third's perspective, I'd like to know maybe what are some things you wish you would have known about having a child who also likes to perform and them going through it. And then Chuck the Fourth, things you wish you would have known, and you can go in either order for who, the lessons first. And if that changes your perspective or your answer, you could answer again.
Sure. If it's all right, I'll go ahead first, and then
Go
Chuck
ahead.
can contradict it, everything that I say. Uh, but it was a great opportunity. I had been doing theater in Chicago for a number of years. And when I had kids, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to start working in children's theater, mainly at the Emerald City Theater Company in Chicago. And a friend of mine was directing the next show, which was The Wizard of Oz. And she had a couple kids, and she goes, "Wouldn't it be great if we could have our kids with us, during rehearsal and being a part of the show?" And I thought that would be great. So I asked Chuck if he wanted to do it, and he was very enthusiastic and wanted to be a part of it. So it was almost like a combination of, work and daycare on the same set. But the the added dimension was that we got to play together too. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I mean, there were other kids there that he was socializing with, but I mean, I really enjoyed being able to spend really quality time working on something creative but fun with him, and the fact that he did enjoy it as much as I did, and everybody else in that, and so we were able to build on that. And he continued to do theater throughout his life, and one of the joys was watching him grow and just his talent kind of blossom. I was very proud of him, and I'm always honored to have the opportunity to work with him because he's a very talented young man, and he gets none of it from me.
Oh, stop it.
So I
That's
mean,
very
so
kind.
as to you as a dad, savor those moments. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. As long as it's what your child wants to do. I hope I've never forced him into doing
What we're
anything.
about to hear, Chuck. So, Chuck, did you ever feel forced? Now's your time to air the dirty laundry. No, no, please tell us your experience.
This is it. This will
No,
get the
no.
ratings.
No, not at all. No, it's been a blast. There's nothing that brings you together like a shared experience and a shared project, and a play or a musical or whatever it might be, especially towards the end when you're spending 12-hour days in tech and all that, it's really the ultimate bonding experience for kind of any group of people. And to do that with your dad is just even better. So I've had a blast with all the shows we've done, and like you said, it's plain pretend, right? And it going into the theater extends the amount of time as an adult that you're allowed to play pretend. So it's great to kind of keep doing that and keep goofing off with you. So no, I've had a blast. And yeah, I'm rediscovering theater now, kind of post pandemic. I took a break at like 2019, which was a bad time to take a break, but it's so liberating to just kind of be back in it. And it's such a warm community and a fun way to unwind after a long day too. Like it's great. And I'm really glad I get to come back to it with my dad. It's great.
Well, Chuck the Fourth, even if, um, even even before I should say 2019 when you decided to take a break from it, like I also want to know like about those years like growing up in it, like were you ever like, come on, Dad, like I know what I'm doing, don't tell me, or were you like did you find like some advice from Dad who does the thing that you're interested in Did that like what were the dynamics at play there? Again, I'm asking for myself so I know what to do and what not to do
Yeah.
with my own child.
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, early childhood, our first handful of shows, I was like 6 or 7, and all of the shows were children's theater. It was like Wizard of Oz. At the same time, I got to hang backstage as he did shows like Where the Wild Things Are and stuff like that. So I was just having a blast. That was great. A couple years later, when I was like 10 or 11, I hadn't done a show in like a year or two, or like been around that. And I did get a small push from my dad to go out for a local production of Oliver at Glenview Theater Guild, maybe 15 years ago or so now. And I think I probably pushed a little bit. I don't know how
Mhm.
much of a, how stubborn I was at 10, but
Yes.
in hindsight, I'm grateful for the small push I did get. And, it was for a local production, and, it was just to audition, and I auditioned with a buddy of mine too, which was great.
And if I might
So
interject here,
jump in. Yeah.
the reason, I mean, I did kind of push him. To go back on what I said earlier, I did kind of push him this one summer to audition for, it was the Glenview Theater Guild, I believe, production of Oliver. I was looking more for something to keep him occupied over the summer, uh, so that he would, rather than sending him to summer camp or, summer school or anything, it was like he would be with a bunch of kids. Oliver has a lot of kids in the production. So I thought it would be a good social interaction and just something to keep him busy for the summer. Of course, he ended up getting the lead in Oliver. And so I ended up becoming kind of his personal assistant too. So I ended up having to do more work for that show. But again, I got to spend time with him and be a part of the production.
All right, so
So
duly noted, theater can be a good substitute in the summer for camp and other things. All right, this is what I'm talking about here.
absolutely, absolutely.
Totally.
So
But yeah, and then, I did theater throughout high school and a little bit post high school too, and it was really nice to be able to come back to, my dad and run a monologue by him, or, talk through like how to approach a scene or anything like that. And, have a friendly voice, kind of give you some guidance, even when it's, maybe some critique or whatever it might be. So no, that's been great.
That's really
yeah.
interesting to hear. That reminds me. This is what I love about our town too, about just the idea. And again, I don't know how I managed to like not come across our town. They like at certain point in the curriculum they like replaced it with other plays, right? And so I'm actually
Uh,
very excited. We're going opening night, my wife and I, to like go and see it. But now I'm reminded
mhm.
of like my dad. So my dad was a theater major. He's in sales, but he was a theater major. And I remember him growing up with him and him telling me like if I had some presentation in school, I remember as early as like seriously like as early as fourth grade, where he's teaching me like, tongue twisters like that he learned in theater. And like I'm running my presentation by him, but it might as well have been a monologue that he's critiquing.
Mhm.
So like it's just
Yeah.
the power of theater, whether it's actual theater or it's like, the life that is theater.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
And that's the beauty of the arts, if you're able to share an experience, especially with your child, whether it's visual arts, performing arts, music, if it's something you can share, it's that much nicer and relationship building. Would you agree, Mr. Quinn?
I would. Yeah.
Yes. Not that he ever got coached by me at all.
so so um uh so Chuck the Fourth, you brought up the pandemic, and that actually is something that we like to talk about on the show, are people's experiences with that pandemic, in particular as it relates to the performing arts and doing things in person. And so we'll tease that experience, and sort of like you had just decided to step away from it, and we'll go to Chuck the Third first. So we'll come back. We got to keep the listeners tuned in to the end of the episode. So
Okay, cool.
Chuck the Third, being
Yes.
involved with the performing arts, and yet that when that pandemic hit, that changed everything. Were you working on a show at the time? Like what was your experience there, and then coming out of the pandemic and being able to start doing things again?
Well, at the time, I was doing a lot of commercial work because acting is a profession. I was doing that. And actually, the last commercial I shot was the December before the everything closed down in March. And that literally changed the industry for television, commercials, and stuff and auditioning because everything moved to self-taping and, remote auditioning, which is a skill I still have to get caught up on. But it changed it dramatically. And the last show I did was the Christmas before, the Christmas show I did with Promenade. And so it literally did shut everything down, and it kind of disconnected the community a little bit. I had some friends who were doing play readings on Zoom to kind of just keep connected and in touch. But it's much nicer being back in a live theater with human beings and working with fellow actors again. I mean, it was a huge speed bump, I think, in the creative world. So it was very frustrating, but I'm glad things are kind of back to a new normal now.
Just quick
So,
follow-up question on that. I'm curious to know then, for the industry, are you still seeing remote opportunities for auditioning, which might be like, do you think that's easier? Do you think that's you prefer the in-person, like pros and cons of like the way that had a change on the industry?
yeah, there are a lot of pros and cons. The pros are, yes, you have more access to different, auditions and so something like that. For me personally, being in the room with the director and the clients was easier for me. It's something I had obviously done for years. But with the remote, there's a certain disconnect, I think, that makes it a little more difficult to get seen and to kind of get into the room, so to speak. But again, it's easier access. It's easier to do a self tape. You don't necessarily get input from the casting director, but you don't have to drive downtown, 30, 40 minutes back and forth to somebody's office. So it is a balancing act. And I'm sure there are some people who are very good at the self tape, and it is a skill that has to be acquired. But again, it's the human contact, being in the room with these people creates a certain dynamic that's lacking. And I think that would be kind of my biggest criticism.
Yeah. Everybody's had to become like a little bit of a low-level production person these days. Like, I've got these like key lights, to help
Yeah.
with the lighting, on a shelf above
Yeah.
my camera, just at home,
Mhm.
and I'm not even in the business. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, people kind of had to invest in all of this and editing equipment on their laptops, and you don't, as I said, you don't get the input from the casting director. I had a lot of great casting directors who would say, "That was a great take. Try this. This is what they're looking for." So you don't get that inside
Yeah.
information that what the client is looking for directly as you did before.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's
yeah.
really interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
Back to the fourth, I know you said you got out of it kind of right at the time of the pandemic, but I'm also, we'd still love to get your perspective on it, and also other folks you knew. Your dad mentioned his experience, but people, that you knew affected by it, and what it was like when it was finally over.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'll speak to my personal experience on it. So at the beginning of 2019, I stepped away from acting for a bit. I had been balancing that between, finishing up college, working full time, and just all that. Wanted to take some time just to have some free time and do other things. Ironically, I saw a friend in a production of The Fantastics at Citadel Theater at the end of February 2020. And that was the moment I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, I forgot how much I missed theater. I'm going to start looking at auditions tomorrow. And 2 weeks later, right, the world shut down. So took the, 4 years or so, 5 years to live the rest of my life, worked, met my wife to be and all that. And didn't really know if I would come back. Kind of thought that that might just be a period of my life that is now, was over. But then just a couple months ago, my dad texted me saying, "Hey, I'm auditioning for our town, and there's a handful of people that we know we would be working with that we like and all that. Do you want to audition and maybe play father and son?" And that was kind of it. That was the lights came on, and I realized like I got to try it again. Like this was a huge part of my life, and now that I'm back, I've forgotten how much I missed it. Like it is just such a wonderful thing, especially post pandemic. An art form that's all about human connection and the authenticity of the moment is really refreshing in the age of like AI generated stuff and all that, it's nice to be in a room with people and share moments. And yeah, especially this show. This was actually my high school freshman year show back when I was 14, and I got to play George then, which was a lot of fun. It's such a great show to revisit, especially post-pandemic, because, for me at 14, our town was most akin to listening to the song Do You Realize by the Flaming Lips for the first time. It's that like broadening of perspective. Do you realize we're floating in a rock in space? Like, yeah, like life is big and all that. And that's really what I got out of it at 14. But now, I'm older, I'm getting married this year. Time's moving a little faster and all that. And the message of the show to savor every moment and try to enjoy it because you're not getting it again, but also to forgive yourself because you can't savor every moment, right? Like you go insane, which the show talks about too. That's really refreshing for me. So I'm sorry, a brief tangent. I'm getting married in a Jewish ceremony later this year, and I'm learning about all the symbols in that. And one of the symbols that I keep thinking back to in relation to our town is the stomping of the glass with, the broken glass to symbolize, even on this joyous day, this beautiful celebration and gathering of everyone you care about in your life and this person that you really love and want to spend the rest of your life with. Even on that day, there is sorrow, there is hardship, there is, the glass symbolizes the fragility of life. And that does not detract from any of the beauty or joy of, the rest of the ceremony and the wedding. And I think throughout the play, Wilder really sprinkles that broken glass in every little moment. At the very beginning of the play, I don't think a spoiler. It's the first 2 minutes. The first time a character walks in, Mrs. Gibbs, we're told a little bit about her and her life, and we're also told exactly how she dies and when. And you're reminded of that and what's to come and everything about life, but it doesn't detract from how beautiful each little moment is in the show. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be doing this, especially right now and post pandemic and all that. It's been great.
I've always liked hearing some version of the line. And, yes, we understand things in life through opposites, right? We could be happy because we understand, things that break, things that are sad, but that may your happiness be multiplied by the shards of glass, right? Because like in things that are
Absolutely.
broken, maybe, we can understand that much more joy and experience that much more happiness in the future. Well, that's great. I don't think we're going to get better than that, Chucks. And it just last chance though, if folks are not already sold, which by the way, listeners, links to buy tickets in the show notes and at deerfieldtheater.com. Let's get butts in seats. Why should people come see the show? If you only had 30 seconds to convince somebody and they haven't heard of it or they haven't seen it in a while, why should they come see Theater D's production of Our Town?
Yeah, I mean, the show speaks to the whole human experience, right? So where you're at in life, it's different things are going to appeal to you. There's a beautiful love story in it. It really does celebrate everyday life. If you like movies like about time or anything like that, you're really going to like Our Town, I think. And it's a classic American play that I think still speaks to us 100 years later. Dad, what do you got?
What he said.
Well,
No, there's some lovely performances in there, and it's, as you said, we're in the midst of rehearsal, and it's nice to see the chemistry of all the actors starting to come together. And I think people will really enjoy it. The message of appreciating every moment is very resonant, especially post-pandemic, and I think they'll enjoy it.
all right, one last time. Chuck the Third, Chuck the Fourth, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. This was fun.
Thanks for having us. This was a blast.
And that's our show. Please share this podcast to help support the work of Deerfield Theater. An even better way to support us is to go see Our Town. To purchase tickets, visit deerfieldtheater.com or click the link in the show notes. Thank you to the production staff and cast for Our Town. Please follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening app to never miss an episode. Until next time, thanks to everyone who continues to support the arts. We'll see you at the theater.